Welcome to Faith Works Live. Here's your host, Rebecca Haney.
Thanks for listening to Faith Works Live. Life is good. I'm glad you're here. Rebecca Haney is my name. If you're new around here, welcome. You're among friends. We love to talk about what it looks like to live out our faith in this crazy old chaotic Romans 1 world. And you know that life is certainly something that's on our heart. It's, I think, the number one issue this side of eternity that we just have to get right. It's just part of our mission. If we seek to follow Christ, we need to emulate his heart for life. And some of our friends in that fight have graciously agreed to join us and to give an overall picture of here in our state, in the state of Iowa. I think we can lead the way in terms of pro-life protection and also pro-life provision in our state, just in the way that we treat women in unplanned pregnancy, for example, the way that we model healthy families. So grand design, big picture, if I had, the power for the day, like that's what I would do. And I think we can go a long way. We have had major opportunities and major progress in our state. Unfortunately, if you've gone back a couple episodes on this topic, we've discussed openly and unfiltered that it's been a little disappointing. It feels like we've stalled in Iowa. So a lot of people are asking the question, what is the pro-life vision? Where are we in pro-life protection in our state? And that is what we're going to talk about today. So I've gathered with my think tank of very smart folks on this experts on this topic. Drew Zahn from the Family Leader, our friend, your friend and mine. Drew, how are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. Great privilege and honor to join you again.
Oh, thank you so much. See, this is why we have him on. And Ryan Benn is with us. He is the Director of Policy. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so you get to deal with more of the legal specifics. What is your job and your role?
Yeah, well, I kind of do a couple of things. I'm in-house counsel. I'm an attorney here at the Family Leader, and also during session, especially a lobbyist down at the Capitol.
Okay, excellent. So you've been pretty busy lately, I would imagine.
Yes, yep. Session just wrapped up. It's a good year. Could have been better, but yeah.
I was going to ask, how do you feel about that?
Yeah. Never be satisfied, right?
Well, that's true. That's true. I will say that in talking with some of our legislators, that the overall feeling that I had with people that I know are convicted on this issue was like, this was it? That was what happened? Yeah. Where did the time go? And what do we have to show for it? So not to be unduly negative, but it seemed like a lot of legislative efforts towards life, especially early on in the session, seemed to be either stymied right out of the gate or didn't make as much progress as I would have expected with a conservative trifecta, as we say, specifically because of this case that they call the heartbeat bill. It's a law that's now been enacted, that's passed through the legislature, that has been signed by the governor, and is now being adjudicated at the Iowa Supreme Court level. And I know you're, of course, very familiar with that. So I'd love to get your take on where we are right now. Maybe you can describe how you've worked this specific case, what your role in that is, and where we are today.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, the legislature's kind of been in a holding pattern after passing the heartbeat law.
That is a diplomatic way to say it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the feeling and the impression we've gotten. They passed the heartbeat law last July. They came in, a lot of them gave up farming for a day to come in back to the legislature and pass the heartbeat law. And I think a lot of them kind of viewed like, okay, we got our pro-life deed done for this year, and we're going to wait for the courts to handle it.
Yeah.
But anyway, right after the law was passed, Planned Parenthood had already sued even before the governor signed it, and got an injunction almost immediately after it was signed, which means the law, according to the court, could not be enforced. And so they had a district court hearing about whether or not to keep that temporary injunction in place, and the state lost. Planned Parenthood won. And the state was allowed to immediately appeal it to the Iowa Supreme Court, which was actually, that was a blessing. It's called an interlocutory appeal.
Okay.
Big word, which means they can appeal before they get a final judgment.
All right.
And that actually saved us like a year and a half. And just had oral argument in the Supreme Court case a couple weeks ago, and now we wait the judge's decision probably late June.
Okay. So just a little bit on the method for those of us out here in the cheap seats. Why is it that when you deliver, like you said, if you are delivering arguments, the court's hearing the case, then oftentimes it takes weeks or months to get a decision on that. What's going on in that time, and why is there that large of a window before you get an answer?
It's the Iowa Supreme Court right now. Yeah. So The case isn't officially submitted until after you've taken oral argument, which was, like I said, a couple weeks back.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember the date on that. It was early April. But at that time, the judges, after the oral argument, they get together in their chambers and they kind of take a preliminary vote, talk about how they want to decide the case. The Iowa Supreme Court already has an opinion writer assigned, but that opinion writer will go forth and make the first draft, and they'll pass it around. They'll talk about it again, suggest edits. There's a huge editing process.
Okay.
I was actually a clerk on the Iowa Supreme Court a couple years ago, and so I was very, very much involved with that. And it takes time, but with cases like abortion cases, it takes even more time. More judges write concurrences or dissents, and those get circulated. So it does take a while.
Okay. I have a couple of questions, and you can answer me in, as much as your attorney background will allow you to, with as much candor as possible.
Right.
That's fascinating that you have a law clerk background, so I'm sure you've seen a lot of different things in terms of the process. One big question that I have, first, how do you think it went from your perspective? What's your impression being in the room?
Yeah, so with oral arguments, you try actually not to make too many conclusions because they usually come back to bite you. It's really hard to tell. But that being said, being in the room, there's really one justice right now that's kind of like the wild card, the mystery opinion on the court, because in the last case, there's 7 justices in the Iowa Supreme Court. One of them had recused herself because of a connection with one of the firms representing the parties.
Okay.
And so it ended up being a 3-3 tie.
In the previous case.
Yeah, in the previous case last year.
Yep.
And so the one justice that sat out, Justice Oxley, I was kind of watching her really carefully in the oral argument, and she's usually pretty quiet, but she actually asked several questions, and none of the questions, gave a strong indication one way or the other, but they also, like some of them in particular, seemed to assume a favorable result to us. Like, if we decide in your favor, state, how do we address this issue on remand? So, the fact she's even thinking in those terms, I mean, that seems positive to me.
Yeah.
But again, you can't draw any conclusions really. So.
Sure. And can you summarize? Again, just for the lay person, what is the crux of the argument that we're presenting from this perspective?
Yeah, so the court really needs to decide by what standard they're going to review the constitutionality of abortion laws or regulations.
Okay.
So there's a constitutional standard that courts use depending on what issue you're talking about. Sometimes it's called strict scrutiny, for example. We just passed a religious freedom law in Iowa that requires strict scrutiny to be applied to any exercise of religion case. And so that's like where the government really has to show. They have to show a compelling interest. They have to show the law is what they call narrowly tailored, or just as minimally invasive as possible. On the other side, there's something called a rational basis, which it's pretty easy for the government to show that they just had some rational reason. They weren't completely making arbitrary decisions by passing this law. So those are 2 examples of ways that courts can apply a standard to a constitutional issue. Now, this case, the court has to set what that standard is going to be for abortion cases going forward.
Okay.
Because 2 years ago, the court overturned the strict scrutiny standard. They said abortion is not a fundamental right, but that they didn't proceed to answer the question, well, then what is it? How are we going to decide the next case? They couldn't agree on that, and so they just kind of punted the issue. And here we are back again. I think they have to decide now. I mean, maybe they could find a way to punt this one, but I think they're going to decide this time.
Right. And then if people recall, we were there at the Family Leaders Forum when the governor came on stage and surrounded by a host of legislators that were there for the signing of the second time around. Yeah. So for those who don't know the history, they passed this essentially the same heartbeat legislation. It went to the court immediately, as you mentioned, Ryan, and then court decides, or I hate to use the term strike down. I know that's, nomenclature, but that's
enjoined
constitutionally. That's not correct. That's not how it's supposed to work. But anyway, so the law didn't go into effect, but then special session, all of this. I remember that, and I remember the joy in the room and all the feeling that, yes, we're taking a stand for life. We're not going to run away from this. We're going to continue to pursue what we believe is right and just in our state. And now here we are back. It feels like deja vu all over again. So do you think, I know this is dangerous to ask you to speculate, speculate on anything like this because we're still in process. So if you can't answer, I've been told no before. But what do you think might be different this time? Is there the likelihood that the same people, because this is all the same justices, right? That have there been any changes on the bench?
So, yeah, this is like the 6th abortion case in 10 years here in
Yeah.
Iowa. So 2 years, there's a change from 2 years ago when they said there is no fundamental right to an abortion, but we're not saying what the standard is. There is a
Right.
change since then. Justice
Okay.
May is in the court instead of Justice Apple, which is actually really, really good for us.
Okay.
And then there's a change from 1 year ago when the court tied and couldn't decide anything, because now we have all 7 justices participating. So,
I see. Okay. So that would be a distinction. Then
Yes.
do you see a likelihood of a different outcome then? Again, I know it's speculation, so you can answer it how you choose. But I think that's what a lot of pro-lifers are wondering. Like, if we were just here and the court decided one way, now we're going to bring it back to essentially that same court, although there is a difference now. Thank you for pointing that out. So what do we think? Can we hope and pray for any different outcome? How would you answer that?
I'd say, yeah. I think the outcome could be very different. Just the way the case is like set up before the court, and attorneys like to get in the weeds on that stuff, and it usually doesn't make a lot of sense when explained. But this case is like set up for actual decision on the merits. It doesn't seem like there's any outs this time that the court could say, well, we're not deciding right now. So yes, definitely can pray for a better outcome. And like I said, there's the one justice that we really don't know where she's going to come down. And so, yes. Definitely, there's hope for a good outcome here.
All right. Well, and we never lose hope, right? I think
Yeah.
just understand from an informed perspective of what the likelihood might be through the process for those of us who aren't experts, right, Drew?
Well, I think if you look back through history and give a little bit more narrative, you see there were moments where it looked like there was no hope, and monumental and even historical changes happened here in Iowa and nationally. So, no, of course, you don't rule out hope. And I'd be happy to go into that history if you want.
Sure. We have a firm reliance on divine providence, I think is what our founders might say. Go ahead, say more.
Well, so some of your listeners may recall it was back in 2018 when Iowa passed the first heartbeat law. And at that time, it was the strictest abortion ruling or law in the country. And it was really, we celebrated that, and we were leaders in the nation. And in fact, other states kind of perked up their ears and said, wait, you can do that?
Yeah.
And following Iowa's law.
Taking notes.
Other states began passing similar laws, and we saw a real movement across the country that eventually led us to that 15-week case that became known as Dobbs out of Mississippi, which overturned Roe v. Wade, the 50-year obstacle in the clearing. And I just personal aside, one of the most powerful and special moments of my life was being in Washington, D.C. on the day that the justices decided. I was right outside, actually praying just outside the Supreme Court on the day of oral arguments when likely, as Ryan explained, the justices went back to their chambers and decided to overturn Roe v. Wade.
God answers prayer.
Indeed, he does. And so we were so incredibly hopeful back in 2018, and then almost immediately we got hit with one of the most stunning state Supreme Court decisions we'd ever seen. A group of justices out of nowhere just decided, no, abortion's a fundamental right. What's that based on? We don't care.
Yeah.
We're reading between the lines on this.
Yeah, a little bit of commentary going on here. My lawyer friend next to me might want to, give a little more nuance.
No,
but
I'm not sure there is nuance there, actually.
Yeah.
They wrote many, many pages to say pretty much, we don't care.
Yeah, pretty much. And that was stunning, and it was heartbreaking because in the state of Iowa, that looked like it was going to throw the pro-life movement and the pro-life cause, I can't even say back. It was worse than it had ever been.
Yeah.
And we were looking at just a series of court cases ahead of us that would strike down every pro-life measure there could or ever would be passed. And at that point in history, we were thinking, oh no, Iowa is going to have abortion legalized through all 9 months on demand for any reason whatsoever, and the taxpayers are going to have to pay for it. It was doomsday scenario. And then we saw a few more laws passed, tested, and we saw a radical overturning of the composition of the Iowa State Supreme Court. You talk about divine intervention. We saw retirements and we saw deaths.
In the past 6 years, 5 of the 7 justices on the Iowa Supreme Court have changed.
Wow.
So
A major overhaul. And then I forget what was the year. It was just. Anyways,
2022, we overturned the.
It was a couple years ago. Yeah.
Yep.
So just a couple years ago, the Iowa State Supreme Court, newly composed, new justices for the most part, did something that almost never is done. They reversed a decision of only a few years previous and said, no, there's no fundamental right in the Iowa Constitution, no fundamental right that would be subject to strict scrutiny, as he explained earlier. And suddenly there's hope again.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have that crazy case where they ended up saying to the Iowa legislature, oh, you guys didn't really mean it when you passed these pro-life laws because you knew they'd be overturned by the court. And so, as you were talking about, Rebecca, at that family leadership summit, the Iowa legislature had a special session to basically pass the law again and say, yes, by golly, we did mean it.
Yes, turns out we did.
Yeah, turns out. And the law was signed at the Family Leadership Summit, and that's where we are today. There's been a lot of back and forth, and it hasn't been little baby steps. It's been all the way one way or almost all the way the other.
Right.
And we're at a position right now where, depending on how this court case goes, we could be in a position soon where babies are protected from the time their heart begins beating.
Right, which would be wonderful. We pray for that outcome. We pray for the time that all children, every life is worth protecting. We know this. We understand this to be true. Science declares this to be true.
Amen. And from the moment of conception till natural death. We call that the gold standard here.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's what we uphold here. And everybody knows, like, I'm standing on my soapbox preaching to the choir as they're getting all tuned up. But the struggle that I have then is, where do we go from here in many ways? Because you have to plan for both outcomes, right? We have to pray for the favorable results from the court, that God would move in a mighty way in their hearts, and that they would side with justice, that they would side with the rights of every human, and to uphold this law as being righteous in the sight of God, for it protects children. And the other side of that, of course, is we have to prepare, what if the other, just for a thought experiment, what happens if? And it's been difficult to have these types of conversations with legislators, quite honestly, because everybody's like, all eyes are watching the courts right now. But I'd love to do, since, we're on the radio /podcast and we can do these kinds of fun experiments, I'd love to cast a vision. And for people to not be disheartened or not feel like there's nothing we can do.
Oh, I would say just the opposite. I hear you. Sorry to interrupt, but you're pushing my buttons.
That's
I got to
talk. Enthusiasm. Give him the floor, ladies and gentlemen. Drew, take it away.
Because honestly, your listeners, you are needed more than ever right now, and I'll explain why. Yes, the law is in the courts, and there's not a whole lot you can do about that. And regardless of which way this court case goes, there will be more wrangling, there will be more legislating, there will be more court cases to come. I don't think
the circus is still in town.
Exactly. And that's not honestly where your listeners are needed the most right now. The reality is, when you look at the polls in this country and you look at the spiritual state of this country, since Roe v. Wade was overturned, and we celebrated that victory 50 years in the making, the public opinion on the abortion issue has swung radically in the other direction. It was only a year ago we could confidently say 13% of Americans would agree with legalized abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy. Today, it's a third of Americans. We have seen the country's heart swing radically the other direction. So even if we get a favorable ruling, but especially if we get a bad ruling, we are facing a big uphill climb right now that's not going to be won in politics. It's going to be won in the hearts and minds and spirits of our friends, our neighbors, and our family. Where we need to be the most active right now is actually where we have the most opportunity to be active. And that is, number one, we need to be in support of our friends, neighbors, etc., anyone facing crisis pregnancy. Do not turn a blind eye. These women need aid. They need help. We need to demonstrate, as a pro-life community, demonstrate that we care about mother and child.
Right.
So volunteering and supporting our crisis pregnancy centers and other means of assistance, we really need to. I mean, I work in public relations. That's my role at the Family Leader. And I can tell you that the public relations nightmares that could set us back when we see states outlawing abortion, protecting lives, but then mothers not being cared for, and the way the media will love to play up those horror stories.
Right.
We need to be there. We need to have a robust system of aiding women in crisis and aiding women facing and families facing unexpected pregnancies so that we don't have those horror stories, and so that the fear that is driving this pendulum swing, and it is fear, it's not logical. I would argue it's also spiritual. So churches, prayer warriors, we need all of us to step up as well in those areas. And then finally, just demonstrating and lovingly winning others to a culture of life. Back in I grew up in the 70s, 80s. Abortion was kind of under the radar a little bit in that people didn't want to talk about it. And there was a whole movement of people who were demonstrating, look at the ultrasound, look at the pictures. People's hearts were changed when they saw life inside the womb. We're going to need to make that argument all over again. See the preciousness of life in the womb. Use the phrase. It's my personal pitch. I would pitch this to every pro-lifer who could ever possibly hear these words.
All right, everyone, listen up.
Stop calling the child in the womb it. That's so dehumanizing. Even if you don't know the gender of the baby, I recommend you pick the word she. It's why we have here at the Family Leader the She's a Baby. And I encourage you to go to she'sababy.com and watch the videos that are there. Refer to children in the womb with that humanizing she or him, not it. And share that message with family, with children, with grandchildren. We have generations that we need to re-win to the issue of the culture of life.
So true and very powerful, Drew. You're good at what you do. Drew Zahn, the Family Leader, and Ryan Benn, our expert guests. We're talking about not only where life is in Iowa, but what the vision could be. And I think it's incredibly personal for each one of us, the people that are committed pro-lifers. There are folks that are maybe more instinctual, like, yeah, sure, I kind of vote this way. I'll just say they're a little more go with the tide in terms of conservative politics. So oftentimes I have that conversation with people saying, what is the preborn child, right? We know that when a woman is pregnant, she's pregnant with what?
A baby.
A baby, right?
A baby.
Pregnant with what? Come on now. This is so, even my 3-year-old understands this reality. He knows about his baby sister, and he loves that. It's something that's very obvious, not even from a faith perspective, but something that it's almost unbelievable in this day and age when we have access to more information than ever before about life developing in the womb. We have access to more scientific research and studies, and the depth of, you could basically become a doctor at Harvard for free online. Now you could have that equivalent of study, and yet we don't seem to have that. We have access to all that information, and the I want to say just the blindness that's there. There are so many people who either don't know or don't really care because they understand that the consequence of recognizing the humanity of that person, that little boy or girl in the womb, has consequences that will limit what they believe are important choices, important options for them. And that's something that I think pro-lifers that I talk to, it's difficult to counter that. You can come up with the arguments that talk about the humanity of the preborn child. Did you know, at what stage their life begins or their heart begins to beat? Did you know that they can suck their thumb in the womb, that they have all of these clearly human traits because logically they're clearly human. We understand this. So what do you do then? And how would you advise someone to respond to a person that says, much like Bill Maher did in a pretty high-profile way, I understand that abortion is murder. Abortion is killing an innocent human being. And in his case, he said, I'm just okay with it. And he said that on national TV.
He did.
And so I think while that is horrifying for me to come face to face, at least I give him points for honesty. And I'm seeing more and more people, especially young women that have been, raised now in a TikTok era where bold is better and brash is beautiful. They might be willing to say, yes, this is a life. Maybe this is a person, who cares? I want to do what I want to do, and my rights are more important. Have you been encountering that argument these days, and how would you help Christians to respond to that?
Yeah, have we seen that argument? Yeah, we have, and we've seen it for a while. It just hasn't been out in the open as much, and Bill Maher honestly did a pretty good service by bringing it out in the light that much. But really what you're talking about is just sort of moral relativism. It's the idea that as long as it doesn't impact me, I'm going to let other people do what they want. And Bill Maher is saying, even murder? And his answer is, yeah, I'm okay with murder.
Radical relativism, perhaps.
Yeah, it is. It's a radical form of relativism. And
I'm guessing he wouldn't feel that way if it was someone that had God forbid, put a gun to his head and said, this is how I choose. This is my choice to live this path. Would he say, oh, go ahead, live your truth?
Exactly. I hear what you're saying. Now, interestingly, again, historically, we've been in a position culturally similar back in the 1950s and 60s when it came to the issue of racial discrimination, especially in the American South, although not just there. You had a large group of folks, mostly in the North and in the West, who didn't have to see it all the time, who dismissed it, says, not my problem, etc. And then in the 1960s, there was a fantastic movie about Selma, demonstrated the reality that when Americans started seeing in their living room on television the pictures in the news reports about the way that black Americans, especially in the South at that time, were being abused and treated as less than human, it broke their hearts. And when it broke their hearts, their moral relativism, since that's kind of just a feeling anyways, it's completely illogical.
It's reflexive, right?
Yes, that it began to change. And we saw a people who said, I don't care, that's their problem, it's not my problem, begin to say, no, injustice is wrong and suffering is wrong and this is wrong and I can't do nothing about it. So that we saw that transition of the hardened heart when people saw in their living rooms kind of what's going on, saw the truth and the reality. And that's why I think that is what we need to do. I would encourage mothers anywhere, if you've had an ultrasound, especially if you've had one of those 3D ultrasounds.
These are really cool.
Yeah, I know, where you can make out the features. Those of you who haven't seen it, I have a whole bunch of kids in my family. I've seen lots of ultrasounds. Like, I can make them out. I know what's going on. The average person who hasn't had all that experience might say, okay, I see black and white fuzz. But the 3D ultrasounds are so incredible because you see the facial expression of the baby. You see the baby sucking his or her thumb.
Right.
It's amazing. I would just encourage moms, put those up on Facebook. Forget about medical privacy for a while. Push forward the story. Bring it to people's living rooms. Let them see you're okay with murdering this.
Yeah, the reality of what we're talking about. Yeah, that this little boy or girl wouldn't be here if, or doesn't have the rights if.
Ultrasound technology was already one of the biggest moving factors that helped us motivate the pro-life movement after 1973, the end of the 70s and the 80s. Well, now we have 3D just in time for the new pro-life revolution that we need to have in this country.
Yeah, and I think another one of those stories, just to piggyback on that, the people that are willing to share when they got diagnoses or doctors encouraging them to abort and they said no, those are so powerful. I hear time and time again these stories of beautiful children that doctors just discounted and they said they're going to have medical problems. Wouldn't it be just easier to, quote, abort and try again is what they told one of my acquaintances. And those who gave their children life, who didn't listen, who prayed and trusted God and said, no, we're going to value this little boy or girl for however long God chooses to give to us. That's personal for us with our story. Part of that is that we lost a child who was born very prematurely and we had about 5 weeks with him, little Gabriel. And it's hard to sometimes go into some of those details, but to show the humanity of our children in the womb and to know that at that same age, there are still doctors that would look at that and say, it's not really a baby. If you want to choose to end willingly, intentionally destroy his life for whatever reason, whatever whim, whatever desire you might have, there doesn't have to be anything legitimate about it. That's not okay.
Yeah.
That's criminal. That's horrible. And I would never, ever want to deprive the world of even 1 minute of a beautiful little boy or girl that God chooses to send here.
Yeah, tell your story. Those of us who are involved in the Christian faith and evangelism, we know that our story is oftentimes so much more powerful than any argument that we can make for the faith. Same, too, for the life and the preciousness of children. Tell your story. I just thought of this little slogan, just came to me, make babies a blessing again.
Yes, absolutely. Babies are worth it. That's the little slogan that I use, is just babies are worth it.
Yeah.
Absolutely they are. And so, yeah, I mean, we don't pretend, we're not starry-eyed in lollipop land, that babies are easy, but nothing valuable. No true treasure is ever easy. It doesn't come easy. We all sacrifice for what we know is worth it. And babies are worth it. They are worth the sacrifice. Babies are a blessing. And I think God's people can lead the way in declaring that and recognizing that. So personally, as you know, the mom culture might trend otherwise, and they might be, the trouble that I have with my kids, and they're such stinkers and all that. And there's like this passive even overt aggression towards moms on social media of like, step away from the phone, step away from the keyboard, and realize that you would even in all the midst of this, when you're knee deep in laundry and dirty diapers and all of that, and everybody's crying and there is no quiet, deep breath. Your life would never be the same without these children. I mean, you would never trade having that quiet house again for not having your child. I don't know anyone who would. And to understand the true value, the true blessing that God provides for us in the next generation. And I know I don't have to tell you guys, because that's what you do. And you lived it out loud. Oh, man, it's a joy to be with you. I do have a couple more questions. Can we take a little break?
Yeah,
And then we'll come back and we'll talk with Ryan and Drew from the Family Leader more about Iowa's vision for life. And I'd love to hear more of your stories too. It is a great delight when you guys send me stories of why you're passionate about pro-life, because they all have names and they have the cutest little faces. So if you want to share those stories, there is power in the story, exactly as Drew said. So let's get good at telling our story, telling our why we are pro-life. And that ultimately, I think, will have the most impact in this culture. So you're listening to Faith Works Live. We're talking life, and we'll be right back with more. Stay tuned. There's no better time than now to stand for life. And you can stand with Iowa's original pro-life organization, Pulse for Life. They're the longest standing nonprofit pro-life organization in Iowa, and they're dedicated to informing, educating, and inspiring a new generation to value the sanctity of all human life, from fertilization until natural death. They serve at the State House. They educate in classrooms, at events. They proudly serve on the coalition of pro-life leaders. They are on the front lines of the battle against this throwaway culture of death that we see all around us, and we are winning ground. Hearts and minds are changing, and the pro-life movement is continuing to grow. And you can be a part of the exciting things that are happening right here in our own backyard at pulseforlife.org, and get your finger on the pro-life pulse. Sign up for their newsletter, find ways that you can make a difference, and how you can change hearts and minds with their pro-life apologetics course, pulseforlife.org. In today's world, security has never been more vital. And at FaithWorks Live, we're proud to partner with VeriGuard Security. It's a professional physical security service, and they're really raising the bar in security and private investigations. Whether you need a team of professional officers to protect what you have worked hard to build, or their mobile security units for multiple properties or large locations, from business or corporate properties to your home or neighborhood. Perhaps you've got an event coming up. They secure quality security coverage for events large and small, because it's about peace of mind and protecting you, your family, your team, and your property. Settle for nothing less than the best when it comes to your security. You shouldn't have to compromise. When it comes to security, you can trust VeriGuard. Contact them today at veriguard.us. That's VARA guard.us. For security service, you can trust VeriGuard. If you've ever wondered what love looks like, check out Agape Pregnancy Resource Center. They offer free services to help women make informed decisions and prepare for their futures. In particular, in a situation of an unplanned pregnancy, women need to know that the truth about their bodies. They need to know the truth about their babies and all of their options. And they'll find that at Agape Pregnancy Resource Center. Go to agapedsm.com and find ways that you can get involved in this amazing ministry, whether it's free pregnancy testing, STD testing, free ultrasounds and counseling, not to mention practical resources, hygiene items, parenting classes, just the list goes on. They change lives. This is a place that truly helps people. And if you care about the women in our community, check out agapedsm.com and click on Get Involved today.
Hey, what's for dinner? If you're like me, I hear that 15 times a day. And fortunately, I have a plan. It's typically Anonymous beef at our house. We are such big fans of Anonymous beef at the Haney home because it's just great quality beef. There's no steroids or antibiotics. It's naturally raised butcher beef. They sell by the quarter, the half, or the whole, and they support your local meat lockers, so they can help you get it processed in a way that works for you. In this economy, it's good to have affordable options for your meat. And if you're willing to make a good investment in your nutrition for a healthy menu plan, I highly recommend Anonymous Beef. Contact Dave and Mary Lynn at anonymousbeef.com. They welcome your questions. They'll help get you on the schedule. They have locker dates coming up. Don't wait. Secure your locker date today. Go to anonymousbeef.com. That's OHNEMUS beef.com. When a woman faces an unplanned pregnancy, every possible emotion goes through her head. Where can she go for help and for hope? She can go to Intervisions. Here in our metro, we have 2 healthcare clinics where she will find hope and help. From free pregnancy testing and STD testing to free ultrasounds, Intervision serves women and men with STDs who find themselves in vulnerable situations. They're completely free of charge because of generous donations from folks like you. And their medical clinics help their patients get all the information that they deserve that empowers them to make life-affirming decisions. That's what they do at Intervision's healthcare clinics right here in Des Moines. Learn more at intervisionshealthcare.org. That's intervisionshealthcare.org. And you can call 24 hours a day at 515-440-CARE. That's 515-440-2273. I'm so glad you're here. This is Faith Works Live. This is my absolute favorite thing. You can probably hear the smile that we get to talk about life with 2 guys that I know are super passionate and have I think we, as Iowans, have the good fortune of having advocates for life, people who are well-positioned to build relationships in not only in the political front, but also to call churches and church leaders and just your everyday Christians to be effective in our culture, in the spheres of government, but also in our communities and in our neighborhoods on this issue as well as many others. But we know that this is, the major front on your hearts as well at the Family Leader. So Drew Zahn is our guest, and Ryan Benn, excellent guest as well. And Ryan, you are the director of policy. You end up in courtrooms and in the State House talking to lawmakers, talking to our justices about issues just like this. And we were just hearing about the power of the story, and I would love to hear your thoughts on what you think is most effective. So when you're in those conversations, I assume you get to know some of these legislators pretty well, and just by being there, right? You're talking to them like average, humans do. Yep. And what do you find when you bring these things up? Because I know what I hear is that there are people who don't even want to bring these issues up because they're concerned that it's too controversial. And I get the same feeling from most legislators that I talk to, like
they have an opinion. And if you ask them about something, they'll kind of revert back to their campaign language and say, well, just so you know, I'm 100% pro-life. This is what I do. And it's like, check the box.
Yes,
and can we move on now? For some, not for all, but you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, we have the same experience a lot. And what we're finding is they just don't want to address this issue because they're scared of the polls or the next election. And honestly, Planned Parenthood does a really, really good job of having their people, that their supporters, contact legislators. They're very faithful to show up at town halls and send emails and angry phone calls and all sorts of stuff. They make a lot of noise. They have big rallies. We could do a better job as a movement too, not only sharing our story with other people and legislators, but also just like making yourselves known, letting a legislator know that, hey, you still care about protecting unborn babies, and you're not going to be as mean, you're not going to shout as much, but this is very important to you.
Yeah.
And you do vote, and just honestly, don't worry about so much how you're doing it. I mean, be respectful and Christian about it, but just talking to a legislator at all is a huge help.
Is it most effective to go in person? I mean, I know that everybody has jobs and lives and families and all that. But
It is. I mean, it's really easy to filter out email. I mean, I know most legislators don't read emails if it's not from someone in their district.
Okay.
In person is definitely better. If you can show up at one of their events, talk to them. But even if you just have, if your legislator, your representative, your senator knows who you are, and they're going to read your emails, they're going to care what you think. You can definitely do that.
Okay. Is it effective to meet with other legislators as well? Because I know, in my district, I've been pretty happy with our representation so far as their voting record on this issue. They're very familiar with us. Hopefully they'll answer my calls. It's kind of, hit or miss for me. But is it also effective to talk with other people, even if you don't live in their district?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, they filter out emails, but if you show up at the Capitol and you just stop a legislator and talk to them, or send in a little slip and request they come out to meet with you, most of them do that. And you're someone that shows up that cares about this. That's going to be just one more point on the scorecard of people actually do care about unborn life, and so that's huge. So something we worked on a lot this year, I just wanted to bring this up because you guys were talking about the power of the picture and ultrasound videos. We're working on what's called a Baby Olivia bill, something North Dakota and Tennessee have done. Have your listeners heard about that at all?
Yeah, we have talked about this. I also know that it did not succeed this year, and I was upset about hearing that. So that was a meeting with my state legislator. Hey, dude, what happened with all this?
Yeah, so
I go out of town. I go out of town for one weekend, and you guys just said, it's not about me.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So even something like that, it seems so simple to us. It's like, this doesn't even limit abortions, right?
Right. All it did is require that and then in the edited version, they just said high schoolers, right? So
seventh grade and up, yeah.
7th grade and up. Would be required to see this video that just shows human development in the womb and has scientific sourcing for all of the truth about embryology, about human development. And it's a well-produced video. It's purely educational. It's not propagandistic or political in nature. It's just designed to educate.
We already have a curriculum on human development, and all we were asking to do was maybe go back from birth to where it actually starts, which is conception. And even that, we were getting legislators just didn't want to touch it. So. It's a big issue right now. We gotta talk to them, convince them that, hey, there's still a lot of people who vote pro-life, and we'll keep working at it.
And I would add one thing as well. So June 4th is primaries, okay? And in many of our districts, this is actually oftentimes a more important election than the one in November is, because it determines for a political party which of these candidates actually makes it on the ballot in November. And if you can do your research, contact your candidates, make noise, far fewer people vote in the primary anyways. Your singular vote, honestly, carries so much more weight, numerically, statistically. So do the research before that primary. Find out which candidate is pro-life and which one is pro-life in name only, which one is willing to be a leader and a champion, and which one will shrink from the battle. And vote for the pro-life candidates in the primaries, because that will make a big difference. We saw that firsthand here in Iowa on the whole school choice issue that came up a while back. There were 6 candidates who were defeated in the primaries, 6 who won in the primaries, and that was the margin of victory, essentially, on the school choice bill. We need to do the same thing on life. In the primaries, get the right people on the ballot so that when you vote in November, it actually makes a difference in what laws are passed.
1,000% true, Drew. Besides, now they need your vote, so they'd probably come and cut your grass. They'll listen to anything that you want to say. Watch your kids for a minute,
That's right.
They need you. But we do need, all seriousness, this is like election day. And I've long thought of, because I'm weird like that, I've long thought of the primary election as the real election day.
It is.
This is the time in which
June
you get
4th
to have
this year.
the most impact, as you said. And we don't have to make, I hear every year how tired people are of choosing between the, quote, lesser of two evils. And this is the time when you can actually do the most good with your vote. You can have a say. You can choose the most principled person to lead your nation, to be your employee, to send as your representative to the Capitol and make decisions on your behalf. And I take that seriously before God. I say this is a stewardship issue in the same way as we do anything else in our household or anything else, in my personal life. My vote is a resource God has given me. And so I want to be honorable to him. I want to do the most good that I can. So primaries, I think, are a very valuable tool for us to do that. Thank you for that reminder, Drew. You mentioned the power of the story, and I think that is vital to understand as we move on this and have conversations with legislators. If you have a specific reason, like Luana Stoltenberg, I absolutely love her, and she has been a champion on this issue specifically because she's so motivated. It's so personal, and she shares the treasure of her story, and it has a very powerful impact. Everybody knows, okay, like it or disagree, right? Agree or disagree. She is committed on this. She's not going to waver. This is very personal for her. And I think there has to be that, hopefully, there is a respect for that, even on the other side of the aisle. I don't know. Maybe I live maybe that's my Pollyanna side coming out. But I also know that they know the power of the story because the pro-abortion side uses stories all the time. How many congressional hearings have we seen a crying 12-year-old testify that if we take away abortion, we're sentencing her to a life of second-class citizenry? We're basically the Handmaid's Tale over here, and they're wearing robes that come dressed up, and we don't care about the poor girl in the back alley. We're going to sentence rape victims to just all these horrible, typically hypothetical discussions. Not always, and largely false, falsified, and at least very colored and skewed, and I want to have as much sympathy as possible for anyone that's been through violent crime. For obviously. In fact, I'm going to be quite a bit tougher on, anyone who is the perpetrator of such a crime than most people on the pro-abortion left. Just set that out in the suggestion box over there. But when we see those types of stories, I think that does have the effect of quieting the pro-life crowd because they're scared that they're going to come across as uncompassionate or that they're callous. And that's not who we are. We do have absolute and utter compassion for anyone that's been through that level of violence. We just understand that it's not going to solve the problem to then create another victim, to then destroy the baby who is the complete innocent party in the middle of all of this. That, at least in that example, no one should be, violence isn't going to fix the violent situation. It's not going to heal. Abortion never heals anything. It only hurts and harms and destroys.
It compounds the crime.
And so just as we reflect on this type of thing, how do we answer those types of stories with both compassion and truth? And you were mentioning our favorite three-legged stool of argumentation.
Yeah, well, so my field of study and my field professionally is communications, and specifically the area of being persuasive in communications. And one of my favorite teachers or philosophers on the issue of communications is Aristotle.
That's a good one.
And so when you say three-legged stool, are we talking about the same thing here?
Might be.
Logos, pathos, and ethos?
That's the one.
Okay. Well, so when I was in college, that's what I did my senior thesis on. And in fact, it was on how Planned Parenthood uses ethos as the most powerful of the three.
My, how prescient you are. This is an astute gentleman. Someone get him a communications job.
But the reality is, pro-lifers, we do have logos, logic. Mm-hmm. Logic is on our side. We know that, and we rely on that, and we're comfortable there. The problem is that's the weakest of the three. And Planned Parenthood and friends, perhaps if they're smart enough, they already know they don't have logic on their side, so they move to what are actually more powerful arguments. One is the emotional pathos, and the easiest way I think to understand ethos is the issue of trust. If I can get you to trust me, I can get you essentially to agree to just about anything. That is how true and the best propaganda works, and that's what my senior thesis was on. For example, we see Planned Parenthood. They have a slogan. You might have heard it sometime. It's called "Care No Matter What," which is just complete nonsense. There is no logos. There is no logic in that. What we see from Planned Parenthood repeatedly is that what they care about is the abortion, not the woman. That's just so evident in their acts and in what they do, and yet they project it. And when they project that, it's not just emotional. It's you need to trust me. And even in my close friends who ought to be and hold pro-life values at heart, but who still support Planned Parenthood, they do because they feel they have a reason to trust Planned Parenthood. They do these good things. They did this for me, etc. What we need to do as a pro-life movement as a whole is to begin to speak in those terms, to demonstrate the trust. And it's not just countering arguments. If you're trying to defeat the other side, you've already lost. What you want to do is capture the heart of the listener.
Okay.
And you do that with, yes, some of the emotional arguments. And we talked about telling our stories, right? That builds, that swells. That's more powerful than logic. But then also the ethos, the concept of trust. And the nation right now, I talked about earlier in the last segment about how the poll numbers are swinging. The nation does not trust the pro-life movement right now. We need to demonstrate by our care for women in crisis pregnancies, for young families after the baby is born. We need to demonstrate care. We need to out-care whatever Planned Parenthood supposedly calls care. We need to do that. We need to take that argument off of the table. And I think you were talking earlier about crime. And in the abortion issue, there's one crime in particular that becomes a test issue and a difficult issue for anyone to deal with, and that's the issue of a pregnancy resulting from rape. And I could cite to you all the statistics that demonstrate that women who go ahead and have that child as opposed to abortion have so much higher rates of healing and health and hope, that it's actually a healing thing in most cases to have that child as opposed to aborting that child. And that I can show you all the statistics, logos again, the logic, I can show you all the statistics, but the person on the street just won't believe it. They won't believe it. I can give you all the numbers and the statistics with all. They won't believe it because their heart hurts for that woman who is a victim. So much more powerful. A few years ago, we had a public hearing at the state capitol on this issue, and there was a woman there who had a child who was a product of a rape. And she told her story with such power and such earnestness. It doesn't matter what side of that argument you were on. If you were on one side, you celebrated her choice for life. If you're on the other side, your resolve to make sure that that option to kill that child was on the table crumbled just a little bit. You could not help it, so strong as that argument. And we need to tell those kinds of stories that demonstrate the preciousness of life, and that those who are advancing a culture of life, we're the ones who care no matter what.
Yeah, and we have those types of testimonies. We have those stories.
We do.
I know one of the Twitter bombs or the social media accusations that Christians get is, oh, you only care about the baby until they're born, but you don't care about the poor folk. If you really cared, if you were really pro-life, ... and then they'll lob some of these verbal grenades at you, then you would really adopt. I'm like, I didn't think it was contested that Christians adopt, that pro-lifers adopt at a far higher rate than anybody else. Like, have you looked around lately? Let me introduce you to reality.
Yeah,
and
but
I
again,
don't know that
that's a
we've had
logical argument.
Right. Well, but if you know their names, right? If you know families that
There
have
you
done
go.
that, if
There
you
you
know
go.
foster care initiatives, for example, which I know is an issue on the heart of the family leader too. And there is power in the local churches. I think it also depends on what the audience is too, because if you're preaching to a bunch of scoffers on the internet, for example, that's going to be a bit different than if you're having a one-on-one conversation with a neighbor that you know and care about. If there is that trust that's already there, someone that you know that you can help and you hang out with, that your church is available, that they have open doors, and people know, whether or not they are best friends with you, they know, hey, you go to that church, you go, there's power in that testimony.
Yeah,
too.
I have literally seen this happen. A person bring that argument. If you really care about life so much, you would foster, you would adopt, you etc. I've seen them bring that argument at our coworker here at the Family Leader, Chuck Hurley. Now, those of you who don't know, Chuck Hurley has fostered 22 children or something like that, right?
He puts his money where his mouth is.
No kidding. And as soon
God
as
bless Chris.
as soon as they bring that argument, and his wife Chris, who runs a Christian school that largely serves poor community on the east side of Des Moines.
They're amazing people.
Exactly. So when they bring that argument, Chuck is able to compassionately. We get the logo, or not the pathos going there. Thank you. Yes. But then also, the argument just dies.
Yeah.
Right there when he brings that up. Now, I have a large family. We don't foster, but one of the stories I like to tell is the story of Cornerstone Church up in Ames. One church who took it upon themselves, so passionate about the issue of adoption and fostering, that in Story County, where Iowa State University is, there is not a single child who's waiting to be placed in foster care. Why? Because one church took them all. Or at least all the ones that others weren't.
So members of that congregation
Yes.
were signed up to be foster care families. And
Yeah.
that's a large, for those who don't know, that's a large congregation.
Cornerstone's a big church, yes. But a big church with a passion in this area who has transformed a whole county. And when you get to know that story and you tell people that story, because I have, when I've had that argument, it just ends. that little, and I didn't actually logically beat the argument at all.
Yeah.
Like as if there was a debate, class, I didn't just win. This was a competition. There's no trophy for me. But in real life, that argument is now over, and we can get on to some real things.
Yeah. Well, there's power in the testimony. And that's, again, evidence. What's evidence that demands a verdict, as I once heard a very smart guy say. Oh, Drew Zahn and Ryan Benn have been our excellent guests. Gentlemen, thank you so much for what you do every single day for the cause for life, for the family, and for our state. I am so just humbled when I see how the state has grown, just as your organization and others like it have come alongside and have really led the way. And you're now exporting that model to other states as well. And that sounds like a fun episode for another day, a fun discussion as to how you are making an impact, how this model is making an impact, not only at the State House, but also in our neighborhoods and in our congregations, and just convicting people yet again of the truth that's always true. But I think, as you mentioned, we start to look at those opinion polls and we start to think, oh, well, it's a losing message. And we hear from, the loudest voices in the land that this is a losing message. You got to leave it to the states. It's all done. It's over and done with. And maybe just right before we wrap up, what are your words of encouragement for pro-lifers who kind of maybe are a little disheartened with the way that these last several elections have gone? We're not ignorant of any of those facts. And it seems like maybe the trend lines are going the other way. And so we hear, well, we're going to put this on the back burner. We're going to take this issue off the table. We just got to leave it to the states. I was, the whole situation in Arizona was very discouraging to me, and the way that was handled. But I don't think that has to be the way that this ends. That is not the outcome that we're hoping for or praying for by any means. But we can lose a little bit of that fire if we hear all these voices telling us. We start to feel like Elijah, like, Lord, am I the only one left? Is this it?
I think
how would you encourage us?
One of my final words would be, we lost a lot of elections between 1973, Roe and Dobbs. It was a 50-year journey, and that journey was filled with ups and downs. The battle for life was not going to be won when Roe versus Wade was overturned. That's when it was going to begin, and we've only just begun.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. It's just this has been a long time coming, the Roe versus Wade being overturned. And you look at a graph, think about, a stock price that goes up and down, up and down, up and down. Hopefully, the general trend line is up, and I think we still could be on that upward trend line, even if the last couple of years have been a little rough since Roe was overturned. But we can still keep fighting and hopefully get some more wins here coming up in the future.
Yeah, and I think broadening our perspective as well, like you guys both mentioned, is to understand that it's not won or lost by one vote, one bill, one court case. The truth is still true. Life is still precious. Babies are still worth it. Make babies a blessing again. Those things, if they are true in our own lives, and we're just living that out. And we're just living in the same way that we would testify to the truth of Jesus Christ. That we live that out. Maybe we're not preaching on the street corner every single day. If that's your gift, go with God. That's wonderful. Locusts and honey, not my thing. But some of us have podcasts. Some of us have microphones. Some of us are living this out every day at our kitchen table. I hope we are living it out at our kitchen tables in our local congregations and neighborhoods, at the soup kitchens, at the pregnancy centers. Hey. We all have places that we can serve. And I think this is all just a part of it. It's just being followers of Christ in this era. This is not a losing fight because we know ultimately which side wins. We know that the heart of God is for life, and that ultimately abundant life is what he promises to his followers, is what he promises that we ought to fill the earth with that goodness, with his joy of life, and to see everyone else, friend or enemy, with that same view, that same love, compassion, care, and dignity as made in the image of God. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate you listening. If you got this far, well, welcome. You're on our most valuable listeners list. And we'd love to hear your feedback, love to hear things that you found to be effective as you're discussing this issue. And I think most importantly and most thematically for this episode, I'd love to hear your story. Why are you pro-life? And let's be willing to share that, to just live that out loud. And this is what it means. This is what it looks like to be pro-life and to be followers of Christ. Get it? Got it? Good. This is our mission here on FaithWorks Live, to love God, to serve people, and to live free. Until next time, it's FaithWorks Live.